Welcome, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another stream of Art Lounge. This is part 19 of Drawing Basics, figure drawing. It is that time of week where I'm going to be doing a quick review of Chapter 1, basically. And that's everything that we've been going over for the past 2 weeks, I guess. But just give you guys like a brief overview of things that are really important to keep in mind. I will start that with this page right here. So this page right here just really symbolizes like one of the most important lessons that you could teach yourself. One of the best habits that you can teach yourself in the beginning when you're first starting to draw is to sketch lightly. And the best way you could do that to really to really improve and to really utilize your time is by getting yourself one of these sketchbooks and practicing these shading techniques, keeping in mind to draw lightly, not to hold a pencil at the base or at the very tip, because just to quickly go over it, when you're holding it that close, you are restricting your range of motion. Whereas if you keep it further, it's giving you that opportunity to keep it loose, have a little bit more control over your pencil. As you could see, my range of motion is shorter, but I'm able to cover a lot more. It's just more comfortable and in general better way to hold it. So yeah, don't give it the death grip, don't hold it too close to the tip. It also encourages you, when you do that, to stiffen up. You know, you're trying to get as much control over the pencil as possible, and you're just like holding on to it really tight. You're making really hard lines that is going to be of service to you later. You want to be loose, and you want to be more free with your lines, with the beginning of your drawing especially. Because if you make a mistake and you've been pressing really hard, or you went into detail, you're gonna have to erase all that. You know, if you make a mistake in terms of proportion, if let's say the figure is off the page and you're like, oh, I gotta move the entire thing now, but everything has been drawn so hard onto the paper, you're just gonna have to start a new page. You know, so it becomes it becomes a big problem, and you don't want to teach yourself that bad habit and then work your way out of it later, you know, as you develop even more skill. But now you're just like really pressing hard on everything. Yeah, you want to avoid doing that. So this is an opportunity. It's a great opportunity to practice all that. You know, when you're on public transportation, if you have a break in between work or school or whatever it is that you're doing, you could just sit down and it's very easy. It's I find it to be comforting. It's kind of mindless, you know. You're not really focusing on too much like technical, too much detail or anything like that. It's just keeping these things in that I just listed in mind as you're doing it. You know, also keeping in mind highlights, midtones, and shadows, which is what you see over here, and making it as smooth of a transition from each gradation as possible. You don't have to press hard. You could just go over the area that is now going to be mid-tone, and then the same thing for shadow. You could just go over it with slight pressure. I mean, again, the idea is to have really good gradual control over your shadows, over the pencil especially. So you're practicing all those things. You're practicing understanding highlights, midtones, and shadows, smooth transition. You're getting better control over your pencil. You're drawing lightly. And also, you could practice your basic shapes, right? This is the very starting point of drawing. you start with the circle because that is going to be how you're going to create the head, which is the unit of measurement for the entire body, which we'll get into in just a minute. But just see how important it is to make sure that the basic shape that you are drawing is proportionate to itself. In a sense, you don't want a lopsided circle for the top of the head. You don't want it to be oblong. You don't want it to be warped, because that's going to throw off everything. And I will show you guys that as well. For those who are just tuning in, I think this is a great opportunity, guys, for you to pick up some ideas, some good habits, and just pay attention to certain details that would really improve your drawing. But getting back to this, getting back to what you could do in this little sketchbook of yours, is continue to practice your basic shapes. Draw the cylinder shape, practice that all over the page, different angles, different perspectives of it. You could do one that's a little bit more tilted towards the viewer. And as you could see, the cylinder shape is in pretty much every single part of the body. So once you perfect that, then you could start changing it, making it more narrow towards the base and wider at the top. And once you do that, it's a lot easier to draw the body in any direction you want it to be, because you just understand its three-dimensional form. You understand how the body parts connect with each other. You understand the proportions because you're using the head measurement. So at that point, once you do practice all that, once you do ingrain it into your mind, like, I got to remember all these principles, it becomes a lot easier for you to just tackle on the figure in any direction that you imagine it. So yeah, you get to practice that, you get to practice the circle, and you could also, even if you get bored of doing these gradations all over the page, you could just do it on these basic shapes. So this is an example of not following the curvature, which isn't bad. It still has 3 dimension to it, right? It still kind of resembles a ball. But once you start creating curvature, the contour lines of your shadows, it starts to take even better shape. It starts to really resemble the object in 3 dimension. So what I mean is by the roundness, when I say curvature, the roundness of the object, of the ball, for instance. So once you do that, then you could start shading according to it, maintaining that curvature. Here's an example of people making the mistake of either making the transition too stark. You got your highlights, midtones, and shadows, and it's blatantly obvious. You want to avoid doing that. You want to make sure that it's a smooth gradation, not to press so hard when you get to the shadows, and just smoothly transition it from midtones to shadows. When it comes to the cylinder shape, the rules are a little bit different. You're not having this top to bottom shading technique, how it is here, for example. It's from side to side. So if it's being hit by light from the top right or top left, it's going to be from side to side. Highlights are going to start here. Let me just do a quick demonstration here. So let's say this is the light source. And notice how I'm going back and just shading more without pressing really hard. I'm just taking my time transitioning from shadows to midtones to highlights. So taking a look at this and taking a look at that, right? This was shaded from the top down. Which one looks more like the cylinder shape? It's this one, right? So that's just a quick overview over the most crucial and the most important good habits you want to teach yourself. Drawing lightly, holding the pencil at a distance, not close to the tip, not giving the pencil a death grip, practicing your basic shapes, having a little sketchbook with you. This is soft cover. You could put duct tape all around the cover to maintain the cover. Yeah, it's easy. You could put it in your pocket. You could put it in your book bag, carry it around with you everywhere. Yeah, just teach yourself these good habits and you'll thank yourself much later. You're going to be like, oh, wow, as I go through the process of drawing and taking on different projects, I could see how it's so important to maintain that. So that's just the very, very basics of it. And then going back to using the head as a unit of measurement, the reason why you want to practice the circle is because it pretty much fits into every single part of the body. Now, if you don't practice circle, let's just go back to this part real quick, where I show you guys demonstrations. For example, here, right, you could see that this is a warped head. And here we use the head as the unit of measurement. So if you use this head as a unit of measurement, pretty much everything else. Trying to find my ruler here. Scrap this for now. Pretty much everything is going to be off because of that. So it's a warped head. You didn't draw the circle right. You just kind of skipped over that and quickly made one. If it's 3 heads going across, right, it's going to be this really wide, broad body, similar to this. So like, this is a head that's warped. It has a... Just going to fold it over to make it easier. It has like a guitar pick sort of head. It's not realistic. And since it's 3 heads going across, you could see by measuring the width of the head that it's going to give this really broad looking body. And since the waist is a head and a half, right? We got a head and about half. It's going to need to connect to the torso. So because it's so broad at the shoulders and this is going to be the waist here, it's going to give this really wide, bizarre looking body shape. The arms are going to be incredibly broad as well. So everything kind of gets thrown off because the shape of the head is wrong. And this is just examples of when you draw the head and you're not paying attention to it being a circle, or you start out with the circle, you just kind of do like an oblong shape for the head. This is an example of it just not even having a chin. It's just a circle. How weird that looks. You can't avoid, for example, drawing the head properly, but studying and making sure everything else is proportionate. It's just not going to make sense. It's not going to look good. This is just an example of how when you are drawing the body and you don't pay attention to this guideline down the middle. If you don't draw the guideline down the middle, it's harder for beginners especially to judge what each half looks like in relation to each other. So on this side, it makes sense, things are right, but you didn't really follow through on the other side. Just because, let's say, you don't have that much experience with anatomy, you're still learning, so you don't want to avoid that. It gives you an easier way to compare and say, okay, well, this side, it's this wide, this side is a little too wide, so maybe I should just bring it in a little bit more so it matches the other side, But if you remove that, if you remove the middle line, it's harder for you to see exactly where is the middle, so you're more prone to making these anatomical mistakes. But eventually, just like, and I use this as a frequent example, just like the alphabet. You learn the alphabet, and at some point you don't need to recite it in order to be able to read, right? You've done enough practice, you've understood the basics, you studied it enough, you memorize things well, and now you just read. You don't have to think about the alphabet and like pronunciate every single letter before you start reading a sentence. So the same thing happens here. You're at this moment, this is your alphabet. You are learning the ABCs by creating these guidelines, drawing these guidelines, memorizing by repeating them over and over visually and physically, so that it's just ingrained in your mind and you don't have to draw all these guidelines every time. But until that point, until you really start to get great results and you start measuring the body based off of that and seeing like, whoa, I nailed it. I got all the proportions right using the head as the unit of measurement, and I didn't have the guidelines. Until then, you really want to practice this as much as possible. And I'm just doing this review to encourage you guys to do it, to remember these things. But essentially, the best way you're going to learn is by practicing it. There's no shortcut there. You can't just read about it and then sit down and instantly draw the proportions right. There's still the physical aspect. You still physically have to be able to do it. Your hand has to do it. And your mind and your hand have to become more intertwined with each other in order to be able to create the right proportions, to draw the lines a certain way. So all this stuff really heavily depends on whether you practice them or not. But yeah, just to get you guys going, just to get the ball rolling there, and to help you keep these principles in mind, I'm going to continue to every few days recite these basics for you so that you could remember better. See, we're like 15 minutes into it. I'm going to do a brief overview of the unit of measurements. And don't worry if you can't catch everything. That's the whole point of me doing it every few days, is because you might get something this time. You might remember, the width of the body is 2 heads, but you won't remember that the whole torso is 4 heads. But the next time, you'll already remember these measurements. You're going to be like, yeah, I remember the 2 head measurement for the body. So I could skip over that and I could focus on a new thing, 4 heads for the entire torso. So that's the whole idea. Don't worry about it. If you can't really remember all this stuff, it's not a big deal at all. Doesn't mean you're not going to get better. Doesn't mean you're not going to improve. It's just going to be another session where you might pick up something new. It's not about speed, really. It's about taking your time to really understand this stuff and enjoy the process. You don't have to catch everything and create everything in a short period of time. That doesn't qualify or disqualify you from becoming very good at drawing, or pretty much anything you're sitting down to learn. I think a lot of people chase this idea of being a prodigy or being this like incredibly quick thinking, fast person. Otherwise it's useless. Otherwise don't bother practicing music, don't bother practicing drawing or writing or whatever. That's nonsense. Don't ever buy into that. That's advice from broken people. Yeah, so just going back to this, let's start from here. 2 heads for the width of the body, 2 heads for the height of the body. It turns into 3 heads when you count the shoulders and the arms. And the same height still. So that's just the point of the diagram to show you guys that despite the change, it's still 2 heads. 2 heads high. Then we got the foot that's a little bit higher than the head, which is an excellent idea to keep in mind. For instance, when you foreshorten things, if you draw the foot and it's still bigger than the head in a foreshortened perspective, let's say the foot is going further back from the body, from the head, it's not going to be the same size, right? But you need a starting point to determine how small it should get. So this is a good starting point. Know that it has to be the size of the head, and then from there it starts to go smaller. So if it's behind or going further back into the distance, but it's still the same size as the head, you're in the wrong direction. You know you have to fix it. It has to be smaller because it's going further and further away. Hand is about 3/4 the size of the head. You can see that it doesn't reach quite the top. Then for the upper part of the leg, it's 1 head for the width, 2 heads for the height. And this is, keep in mind, for the 8-head figure. There's 8-head figure that's normal or common, and then there's the 7-head figure, 7.5. Those are ideal forms. You want to, again, start from a base, start from somewhere, and then you could change things around. Not everybody's 7 heads. There's certain things that are off. There's certain things that might be different from person to person. But again, you want to start from somewhere and then change it around however you like it. Start from somewhere and understand all the proportion, and then do things with it. So that's just kind of the idea behind it. So for the 8-head figure, 2 heads high, 1 head width. For the bottom part of the leg, it's 3/4 the width of the head. But you could easily just follow along. If you draw the bottom part of the leg right, you could just follow along from where you left off at the top part of the leg to determine the width. And notice how it tapers off for both of them. It starts out wide, tapers off towards the base. It starts wide, tapers off towards the ankles. Okay, so moving on to this side. You want to simplify things as much as possible. So we're going to say 4 heads for the top part of the body, 4 heads for the bottom part of the body. And then to make it easier to just divide things, to draw it incrementally, it's 2 heads from the head to the chest, and then from the chest to the groin area is another 2 heads. So 4 heads, 4 heads. Drawing it side by side, you could see how this is also 2 heads from the top of the legs to the knees, and then from the knees down to about halfway through the foot is another 2 heads. And you could also refer back to this, right? So this is why it's important to draw this out and also these, because then you could say, okay, if it's 2 heads here and 2 heads here, how do I make sure to draw this part divided into 2 heads? And here's an example right there. And again, it really heavily depends on how well you draw the head itself. Quick overview here. Half a head for the wrist. As you can see, another good reason why it's important to include the line down the middle, because then you could use that as a unit of measurement for other parts of the body. So if it's half a head for the width of the arm, boom, half a head for the width of the arm. That's right. Half a head, half a head. It's so crucial, as you could see. It's so important in the entire drawing. The circle, the head shape really determines pretty much everything. So as we mentioned earlier, it's a head and a half for the hip area, right? So let's just do it off of this. Head and a half. So we're doing right. And that pretty much sums it up. The most important parts of the chapter 1. You can visit the other streams. At some point I will come back and just do um, other overviews like this, for example, again, why it's so important to include the line down the middle, because you don't want your drawing to end up tilting. This is something that's very, very, very common with beginners, with even intermediate artists and illustrators. They don't really pay attention to how important it is to have your drawing look balanced. Even slightly tipped off to the wrong side, when the intent is to make it look upright, when the intent is to make the figure look stable and make it look in proportion or confident, you don't want to have tilted, because that just throws off the entire perception you want to convey. Same thing here, upright position, right? Same exact type of position, but it's kind of tilted. And the only reason it's even more obvious is because this straight line going down the middle is present. But sometimes people are drawing, and then by the time they get to the foot, they're like, oh, whoa, it's tilted. And they just avoid it. They're just like, okay, whatever. I've gotten this far. I'm just going to keep going. And that's why it's important to start out with that, until your eye gets used to seeing that figure in that position, so that when you do start drawing next time, it'll be coming noticeable much quicker. You won't have to wait until you're like all the way through the image, and then you're like, whoa, that looks really wrong. Yeah, that's another really crucial part. And I do suggest you guys draw this stuff over and over again. Drawing it once, I mean, you could see through the pages that I've done this over and over and over again, is the best way to learn. It's not just about getting it down once and getting it right and then expecting it to work for you every single time. It's a memory game as well. You really have to, you'll remember it that day, but then you go to sleep, you wake up the next day, and your memory is a little bit foggy. But that becomes less and less foggy the more you do it every single day, the more you repeat it over and over again. Just like I was mentioning the alphabet, right? You don't have to recite it every day anymore. You just read and write, and you're good at it because you've practiced and you've done it so often. So the same idea here. All those principles, all those guidelines I was talking about, it's important for you guys to do that often, especially if you're just learning, if you just started out. Do it over and over and over again. And I'll just demonstrate to you guys. As you could see, I spent pretty much all the time making sure that the entire page is covered, from page to page, practicing stuff. And you could see how the figure is pretty much done multiple times, several times, the same poses or the same concepts. Like I've drawn this here as well. See, it's here and it's also here. I've also done it a couple of times here as well. So once is not enough. Twice is not enough. You have to keep doing it and just make it a habit. And this is why it's great to have the sketchbook here. You could have two sketchbooks. You could have one that's for just filling up the pages with these basic principles, and the other one for more final work or pieces that you really want to take your time with. You don't want to just sketch it through. You want to dedicate the entire page to that drawing, whatnot. So, yeah, just create yourself these little schedules, little plans to help you get better. I'll be right back, guys. Hold on. get the door. So going back to yesterday's drawing, we started chapter 2, and now we're gonna get more into detail of each body part. We're gonna do the arms, we're gonna do the hands, the feet, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the head, just taking time to draw each one out, whereas chapter 1 was just kind of like an overview. It was a more simplified overview of everything that's going to be in the entire book. So some people are going to ask, like, why do you need to draw these like really technical, complicated muscles? And this is more of like a medical thing. Why do you want to spend time doing that? You don't draw any of this stuff anyways when you're drawing the, let's say, the figure or action poses or whatever. And the reason why is because it'll help you understand why you draw these lines the way that you do. So rather than just drawing something over and over and not really understanding its purpose there, you just know that it just looks good. You take the time and you actually learn this stuff so that when you do draw them, you can add little technical, you could add like details that will make it look even better. And this is a perfect example right here. As you could see, it's such a great understanding. John Buscema's understanding of the human figure is so great. He's able to add these little shadows in areas that make the figure even more interesting, right? Like, imagine if all these little details were gone. It wouldn't be as compelling. Your eye wouldn't gravitate towards him in the foreground as much. But because he understands how the muscle groups work, where the muscles are, just the simple shade, right? He's not drawing the ligaments. He's not drawing the incredible amount of detail that you see in these kind of drawings. He's not doing that, but he's implying that the muscle is there, and he knows that this shadow right here will actually make it look like that muscle is protruding. So he's not drawing that shadow below, right, the elbow, right where the elbow is. He knows exactly where to place it to make it look right. The same thing here, adding the shadow really shows this other muscle that's present there as well. And all that just makes for a great image. So that is the real benefit. Like, you could even see here as well, this shadow right here indicating that there's a muscle difference there. Same thing over here. All this stuff just makes it better. And as you could see, it doesn't have to be incredibly detail complicated. But it's important to learn them as they are in detail, so that when you do make the shading, or you do make the suggestion that the muscle is there, the muscle's popping out, or he's really muscular in that area, let's say, for it to make sense. So this just does all that. It kind of helps you, gets you more familiar with all these different muscle groups. And the more you understand the figure in 3D, the easier it is for you to draw all of it correctly. So when you're challenging yourself and you're working from your imagination and you're trying to draw the arm in a way that is in motion, right, and you want to add that little detail to make it look even cooler, it's all going to be helped by this understanding. You'll have this 3D model in your head, in your brain, from practicing all this stuff, and it's going to be more vivid. So you could actually play around with it in your mind, and you could translate it to your hand and be able to draw those things out. So let's get into it. Over here is the terms here. It's important to understand, or not to understand them, but to know these terms, or to see really where they are, because as we go further into the details on these arms and you're going to see them in motion, you're going to want to know, what is that muscle, right? You're going to want to know, oh, it's this muscle. When you turn the arm, it comes out more in the side view, or it's a little, it shows here in the side view, but not all the way around. You see what I mean? Like that's really the benefit of it, so that you could tell it's motion all around, three-dimensionally. You could understand it from the back, the front view, and the side view, and that kind of helps you draw it out, right? Like it's now twisting, and I could see that muscle from the back, from the side to the front. Whereas if you don't have these labels for them, you just won't know. Every muscle is just going to look like any other muscle. So this is something that I used to get frustrated about, because I was like, I just want to draw the figure. You know, I just want to be able to draw things that I like and not have to like do these very technical things. And I understand that, you know, I sympathize with that, because yeah, I get it. You don't really want to get into these nitty-gritty details. It's not as interesting as, let's say, drawing your favorite comic book character. But if you really want to improve, you really want to challenge yourself to get to the next level, to depend less and less on references, and be able to draw from your imagination better, and develop even your own style. This is the best way to do it, is just building your understanding of the human figure in your imagination as much as possible. That's really what the point of it is. At times I used to think oh, people who learn this stuff just want to impress others with their terminology and knowledge, and be like, oh, I know where the what is this, extensor carpi radialis is. You know, it becomes like an ego trip for them, rather than just having a better understanding of the anatomy. You know, so that's why I used to just say, whatever, it's not really that important. But the more I started to draw from imagination, the more I noticed, well, why is it that these artists understand anatomy so well? Yeah, how are they able to draw all these poses and all these figures, you know, without really having a reference there? You know, you look through the comic book and you see so many pages and so many different poses and so many different figures. It's less likely that they used a model or reference for every single one of them, especially back then. You know, I think back then they didn't have the internet to look through, you know, and find the exact pose that they wanted. It was just in combination of having those mannequins, like these guys and other ones similar, and shaping them and drawing from that, you know, and trying to understand the anatomy technically to allow them to draw these characters. And at some point they just didn't need to refer to it anymore. You know, it was just like I was mentioning, it became their alphabet that they learned so well, that they studied and memorized. So I just wanted to start pursuing that more. I was like, why not get to that level? If they were able to do it back then with no internet, with no references, it's possible. It's doable to get to that level of drawing. And the experience of drawing from your imagination is, I think, even more fun than drawing from reference. sure, you got something there, and if you get it down exactly as it is, it's rewarding to know, like, yeah, I got this, good eye for detail, and I could really challenge myself to do it right. My hand-eye coordination is getting good. That's great, but it's a lot more fun when you don't have anything next to you and you're just sitting there, whether you're on your couch, whether you're in any setting where you don't even have that much room, and you're able to draw out these really cool, well-drawn figures just from your imagination. That's so much more rewarding, I think. Again, I'm not knocking reference drawing. I think that it's great. It's a confidence builder. It definitely helps you stay motivated and wanting to draw, as opposed to just failing to draw from your imagination and just being like, I'm not good at this. I'm not going to continue. So there's definitely benefits to it. I'm not knocking it. I just think you could take yourself to the next level. You could. This is where the next level is just studying all this stuff, not just drawing it, but really studying it, seeing like, oh, okay, this is the supinator longus, and in this view it's here, and then when you change the perspective, it's here as well. So I could draw this muscle and it's going to look right. I'm going to draw this little line here in this position, and it's going to make sense. It's going to look good. And even, for me, I'm still drawing this frequently, as I was showing you guys just a few moments ago. It's not enough to just draw this once. So I'm going to draw this once, and I'm going to try to sit down and draw. I'm not going to remember all these things. You have to continuously draw them over and over again, label them as well. So that way you're actually taking the time to focus on that, to when you're labeling it each and every time, you're repeating, you're ingraining it more. Okay, this is the supinator longus. And okay, I'm just gonna do that and then point it out. So this is the muscle in side view, right? The supinator longus right here. And it's right here in the front view. So you could see that it's actually being turned over. The muscles on the backside are turning over on top of the supinator longus. So you could even just do these little lines right here to indicate that the arm is like twisting and stuff, and play around with it. It doesn't necessarily have to be, from start to finish there for it to make sense, because again, this is going to be a skin layer on top of it. But just like I mentioned with John Buscema's drawing there, you could just have the suggestion of it being there. The same thing here. You could just play around with that and see how it pops out. Then I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna say this is the extensor carpi radialis. And that's present right here as well. So this muscle right here is this muscle right here. These are the same muscle groups. Kind of want to highlight them more by making them bolder. And this one right here isn't present in the back view. It's only in the front view and in the side view, the inside view. So we got the inside view and we got the outside view. And draw a line from there. And draw these lines connecting to the titles. It's a little messy, But again, this isn't the last time I'm going to draw this, but it's just to highlight where it's present in all the views. So you got the supinator longus on the inside, as right here. Then on the side view, outside of it, it's right here. And just on the front view, it's right here. So you could see what comes out is the extensor carpi radialis. When the arm twists, then it's the supinator longus starts to not get covered by the extensor carpi radialis. And you could see that the extensor carpi radialis is on the outside right here. So it's present on the back view on this side right here, on the inside view right here. It's interesting. I'm a little bit confused here because this is the extensor carpi radialis and this should be the extensor carpi radialis as well. But it's saying that it is the supinator longus there. Come on, book. What are you doing? You shouldn't be contradicting yourself. Just gonna study that for a minute to see if maybe I could catch the difference. I'm gonna say that this right here is the extensor carpi radialis in this example. It's not this one. This one is the supinator longus that is present here and is present here. And when it twists, right, you're seeing a twist, that's when you start to see the extensor carpi radialis. So we did a little bit of discovery there. See, like you just study it for a minute, you take a look and you're like, wait, what's going on here? Isn't it this muscle? Right, so in this view, it's not turning, right? The arm isn't turning, but here you could see that the hand turns downwards. So all these muscles follow that motion and turn inwards as well. And this is what the extensor carpi radialis pops out. Then I'm going to do a quick one here. This is the flexor carpi radialis, which is different from the extensor carpi radialis. I want to see if there's going to be more examples of these muscle groups in the arms in this book. And doesn't seem like it. I think it's just a brief overview of it. I think another great book for this sort of thing is Briggs. It's an anatomy book. It talks about all these different muscles, so you could get even better understanding of all the different muscle groups. But in this book, it's dividing them into two muscle groups. We've got the extensors and the flexors. So it's just a brief overview of that. So, I'm gonna cut it here, ladies and gents. If you have any questions, comments, leave them in any of the social medias or in chat. I'll read them. I'll write you back. I'll address it in the next stream. I will be back Monday. I'm taking a break tomorrow for more figure drawing classes, figure drawing basics. Sessions, streaming sessions on Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I will take a short 5-minute break and I will come back to do drawing comics, where I'll be continuing this panel right here, doing John Buscema's beautiful work. So stick around. If you enjoy the content, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, both go a long way. And I'll see you in the next stream.